Welcome to Macquarie University's Postgraduate Showcase for Law and Social Sciences. I'm Sienna, a Macquarie Student Ambassador. In tonight's session, you'll hear from course directors from our Masters of Public and Social Policy, Juris Doctor, Master of Laws, International Trade and Commerce Law, and Master of Planning. They will give you insight into the Macquarie benefits and career prospects that await our graduates, and you'll also have a chance to get your questions answered tonight. To kick off tonight's session, I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Toby Fattori, Course Director for the Master of Public and Social Policy. For our audience, please put any of your questions you may have for Toby in the Q&A chat box. Toby, welcome and over to you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sienna. I will just share my screen, so just give me one moment. Here we go. Excellent. And look, so thanks for the opportunity. My name is Toby Fattori. I help run the Master of Public and Social Policy, and I run several courses or subjects or core units in the program. So it's great to be able to talk to you about the Master of Public and Social Policy. So look, the major issues facing Australia today, and also really the globe today and tomorrow, all have a social dimension. We can think about poverty, food security, climate change, healthcare, an aging society, education. All of these have a particularly social dimension. They're all complex. And what the Master of Public and Social Policy does is that it equips you to find solutions to some of these major challenges that we're confronting by helping you develop skills to make sense of the world through critical inquiry. And specifically, it does this with a dual focus through applied social research and through policy analysis skills. So applied social research and these social research skills help you inquire into the world. That is, what is the evidence of what is occurring, as opposed to commonplace assumptions or just your uncle's opinion. It's about collecting firm evidence to see what's happening. And the policy analysis skills are really they're the kinds of tools that help you bring about social change. So this is how we might make the best kinds of decisions using the evidence that we've gathered to take into account the whole range of factors behind a complex situation. And so really this helps us to deal with the issues seeking to address. So look, really now more than ever, we need people who can address these kinds of complex challenges. And this Masters of Public and Social Policy is really designed to produce graduates with the capabilities to do so. So here we've got a kind of a montage which we've created, which is illustrative of the kinds of things that a social scientists do, and also the kinds of things that they bring to understand and develop solutions to contemporary social problems. So at the top left image is a kind of a representation and a depiction of philosophers. And that's because in the Masters, we really discuss questions, some really important questions. We ask the big questions, but we also talk about how we can justify the claims that we make in regards to a particular problem and what counts as evidence. And that's really quite critical. And this is in part what differentiates us from, say, for example, philosophers, because we have a social research focus. But we do ask questions like, what makes a good society? How might we eradicate poverty? How might we, support good quality aging? How can we ensure that people with disability lead dignified lives? These are the kinds of questions that as social science graduates and also social scientists we ask. So what's really critical, of course, is that we gather useful and valid knowledge really to help inform us in making the decisions, but not only that, to provide the community with greater stock of high quality and good knowledge and good evidence. And this is particularly the case, particularly important now, with increasing misinformation and disinformation within the public sphere and within public debates. So as social scientists, we use research tools to gather credible evidence, and we try and use these tools in decision making so that we can make decisions which are based on the best possible evidence. So if we go back to our montage, the line graph and the kinds of the people speaking with bubbles represent quantitative and qualitative research skills that you'd learn about and actually applying Master of Public and Social Policy. So quantitative methods, which are the kind of that line graph there, which is about population growth rates, typically involve measuring social attributes at a very, very broad level. They're things like surveys, they're things like experiments, and this provides really useful and important information about the patterns and trends which are occurring in the world. So we can use this kind of data to actually predict with a certain amount of confidence whether, for example, a local sustainability initiative might be supported within a particular area or a particular community by looking at things like the kinds of characteristics of that local community. For example, income levels, education levels, the kinds of jobs that people are doing, but also running surveys specifically about kind of people's attitudes to climate change. But if we wanted to know why people hold the kinds of values or attitudes that they have, which we might find out in a survey, then we ask them directly. And this is where the qualitative methods come in, where that picture with the speech bubbles. So these are things like interviewing people in depth to find out why they hold the views that they hold, and really to kind of make sense and meaning of people's experiences. So we need both kinds of tools, both quantitative and qualitative methods, to actually help us make good decisions, which can help us in a way make better, change the world, right? And also kind of create applied solutions to particular problems. And so one of the things that we do, of course, is we talk about inequality. And this is a kind of a map of New South Wales there, which demonstrates the kinds of rates of inequality which exist in New South Wales, using a whole range of measures which social scientists have created and then also collect data about. So this really gives us a sense of what social scientists might be looking at in terms of the distribution of individual opportunities. So that we can plan, for example, to eradicate inequality or provide better access to healthcare, or to determine where we might want to, say, focus industry policy, for example, like a new, say, advanced manufacturing plant, right? It might be best to be located in an area where, for example, there's high rates of kind of unemployment or declining employment. So we use the tools of social science to help us with planning in that particular way. Now, so as well as that, we might think about the kinds of life chances that also that people have, which are really influential in informing their particular views. And so the picture next to that map of New South Wales is related to this distribution of life chances. So it's a picture of people who are protesting the Alice Springs intervention. So this has been in the headlines recently. Now, the intervention was a package of measures introduced by legislation in the Northern Territory, which included things like restrictions on the consumption of alcohol and pornography, and changes to welfare payments, as well as changes to the management and delivery of things like education. So these interventions have been criticised by some as being highly discriminatory, but by others, they've been supported as something which is absolutely necessary. So what we would be doing as social scientists is look at whether these interventions have worked. We might do something like look at whether rates of crime have increased or decreased, and whether, for example, policing interventions within the Northern Territory and Alice Springs in particular have worked or not. And so we can track those things over time and measure them, again, using those kinds of tools, both qualitative and quantitative research tools to help us see what's going on. But the other thing that we would do is we wouldn't necessarily just be satisfied with that particular answer. What we would want to do is try and work out the influence of broader kinds of contexts. For example, histories of decolonisation and racism, which have a kind of a long influence and which might affect people's experiences in the present. So we also look at things historically and try and take into account the kind of a long-term trends which are occurring to help us explain why things are occurring now. And so that last picture there, which is a kind of a McDonald's picture, emphasizes the world as a global place. And as social scientists, we're interested in globalization and global patterns. So we're interested where ideas come from and how they transfer and translate around the world. And this is kind of a critical component of policy design, and also looking at alternatives in policy. So, for example, we in Australia have a particular way of doing, for example, education, but that might be quite different in a place like Finland or in China, right? And that might have particularly different outcomes in terms of, say, educational attainment and also kinds of, long-term job prospects. So we would look at those ideas as well from around the world and see whether they are relevant and can be used in our local context. So let's talk about the program itself. Okay, so it comprises 8 core subjects. If you do it full time, you can do it within 12 months. And there are subjects which focus more on research, and there are subjects which focus more on policy. So again, reflecting that dual role. So let's talk about the policy and decision-making subjects first. So we've got POIR 8090, which is Advanced Introduction to Policy. And so this unit focuses on how policy is made and who makes it. It introduces you to the big ideas around policy design and also policy interests and conflict and power. And because, so there's a lot of contestation, if you read the paper, over any particular issue, right? So for example, just recently, we've got very big debates about the voice, as well as, for example, debates about whether the budget, which was handed down by the Commonwealth Government, will increase inflation or not. So it's a contested space, which actually also makes it very exciting. We also have policy ideas in focus, and this gives you an understanding of state-of-the-art innovations in policy design and policy thinking. So here we're thinking about the influences of brain and mind sciences, the use of big data in policymaking and in government. For example, what's happening with, artificial intelligence and open AI will also have significant influences on how we do policy. Things like nudge theory, which is the use of positive reinforcement and indirect suggestion to bring about behavioural change. These are kinds of all areas that students might learn about in this course. So they're very, very innovative kinds of areas of policy design. So policy design concepts and case studies, which I will teach with my colleague Ben Speeds-Butcher. This is getting students to work together in small groups on a particular case study. So what we try and do here is that we work through the policy process on a particular example of a policy area to try and emulate what real world policy making is all about. And so we choose a range of policy case studies which are relevant at the time, both in Australia and also internationally, and students get to work on that particular issue intensively over the course of the semester. And then making public policy in a globalized world is referring back to the influence of globalization on policymaking processes. So how are policies made in international contexts, and also how policy ideas kind of move around the world and influence each other. So this is really about institutional and international actors. So if you have an interest in, say, international development in particular, and also kind of, or if you're an international student, this will in particular resonate with you, I would think. So that's, about making good decisions and both the policy and the politics of decision-making processes. The evidence part and those evidence-based units or those research-based units, we also have 4 of those. Now, one of those is social impact assessment. Now, this is a really important tool which planners use, but we can also use social impact assessments as a kind of a tool to help us predict the impact of a decision that we are going to make. Yeah, so it's very future oriented. So for example, we might have a particular plan of, say, for example, running the metro line through from Chatswood out to the inner west of Sydney. We will try and use social impact assessment tools to predict the social, economic and other impacts of that decision in the short, medium and long term. So very powerful and predictive tool. The flip side of it is what you learn in evaluating social policy, which is also very increasingly used social research tool, which is about using different kinds of data collection tools to see whether what we have done has worked. So for example, we might have a policy or a program, or we've made a decision, and we want to see whether we've met the desired outcomes that we were planning for. And this demonstrates whether it's been effective, efficient, and it's had impact, and whether we need to change the decision or the policy or the program based on our evaluation and the evidence that we've gathered from that. And really interestingly, there's a big call for both people, people who can do social impact assessment and can do evaluation at the moment. And actually there's a real kind of, absence of people with these kinds of skills. So a lot of our graduates work as evaluators or do social impact assessments. There's a really big demand for them at the moment. And then we've got the two more, I suppose, hardcore social research methods units. We've got one for doing social survey research, which is giving you the tools about how to run surveys, how to do statistical analysis, how to analyze statistics. And we've also got the qualitative methods for policy, which is really about how you design a whole study, which does things like asks people about their experiences, observes people in their local context and in their natural context, and gets their opinions about what is happening in the world around them. And both doing social survey research and qualitative methods for policy are really kind of powerful tools, because by the end of it, not only are you someone who can critically consume information, which is increasingly important in our contemporary world, but you're also someone who can contribute good, new evidence and knowledge. And those tools and these courses provide you with those tools, and they're really very, very powerful tools to have. So this is a kind of an example of what we would do within, say, a class in the Master of Public and Social Policy. And it also gives us a sense of the kinds of areas in which our graduates would work. So this is a kind of an example about the kind of the cost of living crisis and the housing affordability crisis. Something which is really on the front pages of the kinds of the newspapers. It's attracting significant media attention, and it's creating a lot of, attracting a lot of policy concern by governments. And it's what's called a wicked problem. There's no easy solution to the housing affordability crisis in this country. So what our graduates will do, and also what real policy work involves, is not only kind of arguing about the nature of it. We would measure the size of the problem. How many people is it affecting, and which people are especially affected by it? And we would do that by also through, for example, surveys. And we would also listen to people's experience as well. For example, people who have recently lost their home and the reasons why they lost their home and how they're coping and managing. And we would do that also by studying what we already know about the particular housing affordability crisis, to give us an idea of the nature of a problem elsewhere and maybe some possible solutions. Now, with all that information, we would go about analysing it, and we would have to do that in a way which is systematic and disciplined, which really uses what we know to carefully analyse it, to develop a kind of a good evidence for us to then develop alternative solutions to the housing crisis. Do we need, for example, a housing future fund? Do we need to build more houses right now? Do we need to put on rental caps, for example? So we would be collecting evidence to look at those different alternative solutions. But as well as that, we would also be thinking about who's involved, who the different stakeholders are, as in, there are various different interests involved in this particular issue. Not only government, but also kinds of people who have investment properties, also renters associations, and how do they see the problem, and what's their interest in it, and what kinds of solutions are they proposing. And this is something which can help us understand how an issue gets onto the agenda, and also really gives us a sense of the kinds of political context for how we might make a decision. Now, we have graduates who are working, for example, within government, doing both the data gathering part of this kind of role, but also the decision-making part of this role. But we also have graduates who are working for particular kinds of peak bodies and interests, like unions, like housing associations, like non-government organisations who are trying to make conditions better for people who are down on their luck. Okay, so this is the kind of it's a bit, what the question that I want to pose here is about what you can do with this Masters of Public and Social Policy. And look, I think, already I've hinted at that you can do quite a lot. But the point that I want to emphasize here is that if you do, for example, a master's degree in nursing, you're pretty much qualified only to be a nurse, or a degree in optometry, pretty much an optometrist. But if you do a Master of Public and Social Policy, you're qualified for a whole range of positions. And this is because the Master of Public and Social Policy emphasizes those core set of skills which are applicable to a broad range of vocational areas and occupations. Now, in the most recent graduate outcomes survey, when we look at postgraduate coursework graduates in humanities, culture and social sciences, approximately 92% were employed either full-time or part-time, and their median salary was approximately 87,000. And really, and whilst I won't go through the career opportunities and where people are employed, the point to emphasize here is that both the kinds of jobs and the areas in which people are employed are really, really diverse. And we can talk more about that in the questions. So really, where I want to conclude with this is that this particular master's qualifies you for a set of skills that are highly adaptable. And this is why our graduates are highly employable. The degree emphasizes abilities to research, to adapt and to apply knowledge, and also to make important decisions. And this gives Master of Public and Social Policy graduates a real advantage, because in the near future, jobs that exist now will no longer exist. Others will have been created that we don't even know about yet. Even with existing jobs, the way of doing things will alter dramatically. So given this, there's more and more reliance upon people who have the skills to critically analyze information, to create information, and also to direct other people in the use of information. And so these are the people who are equipped to ask critical questions about how the social world functions. And the Masters of Public and Social Policy is perfect in giving you these skills. So this is where I want to leave it. I think we've got a little bit of time for questions now. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Toby. And you're right, we do have a few questions that have come in over the course of your session. To kick off the Q&A, one of the first questions that we have is, what's unique to Macquarie's public and social policy versus other institutions? Could you tell us a bit about what's unique about Macquarie, essentially?
So my apologies that the light went off in my room for some reason. So, we'll have to use our decision making to see why there's a particular blackout in this part of Macquarie University. Okay, so I would say there are two kinds of critical features which makes our masters unique. One is this combination of research and policy making skills, right? So as I kind of described quite extensively in my presentation. But the other thing is that we teach policy making for the real world. So often if you do other master's degrees in government or in public administration, it gives you this kind of very neat kind of description of the policy cycle. And it's really only relevant if you're working, for example, in only certain small parts of government, like in central agencies. Our graduates know how to negotiate, they know how to argue, they know how to persuade, as well as doing research. And these are the kinds of valuable skills which are required, not only if you're working in central agencies, but you might be working in the community sector, you might be working for a peak body which is trying to promote a particular position, or a kind of a particular branch of government which is all about negotiation. And so that's what our graduates learn, and actually this makes our graduates actually quite unique and quite distinct from other graduates from other programs.
I'm sure we'll hear it a lot about our different courses tonight, but I think the biggest thing about being a Macquarie student, I think, is how prepared for industry you are, regardless of the course. And that's a great example of that as well. We have a question from an attendee who says that they're looking to move from a communications role into a more policy focused role. So what are the benefits of going back to uni to do a Master of Public and Social Policy versus of making the transition into a job in their own workplace, which is an advocacy organisation?
Okay, so if they're wanting to move into a policy role, they can use the kinds of skills in communication to their advantage, but they're not equipped to do the things which our graduates are doing, so to know how to do policy. So that means, as well as not only a communication degree is great because it helps you persuade people and develop a message, but where the message comes from and who the message is directed towards are things which people who know how to do policy are really also very well equipped at doing. So you would see, for example, if you're working in an advocacy role, that it's a little bit like a fight. Yeah, sometimes you have to use evidence as a kind of a thing to persuade others, and also you have to counter other particular positions because policymaking is a contested space. As I said, that's also one of the kind of exciting things about the policy world. And so as well as being able to communicate the message in an advocacy role, you would do our Master of Public and Social Policy to be able to gather evidence and also to use existing evidence to tailor a message. Yeah, and then also, if you're interested in a policy role, to design policy. And that's really the ultimate outcome. So a messaging might be as good to sell something, which is great, but it's a policy per se, which is really about making the change.
Great answer. Another question from an attendee is, what kind of organisations are hiring Macquarie graduate as social impact assessors, which I think was one of your examples?
Yeah, so for social impact assessors, definitely local councils are really employing a lot of our graduates to do this kind of work. But we also have people who are working, for example, the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute. We also have some people who are working for property developers as well, right? So planning on their behalf. So we've got people who are working for different levels of government, those who are working, for example, in the housing kind of peak body space, and also in private industry. But the thing about social impact assessment is that it's something which you can use as a tool in a lot of different contexts. So for example, if you're employed as a policy officer within a kind of a charitable organisation, like for example Mission Australia, you might then be able to use your social impact assessment knowledge to help with the planning of a particular program that Mission Australia is intending on running. And that actually might be skills that your colleagues might not have. So you're bringing something new and important to the table.
For sure. So lots of options, I guess, whatever you kind of end up doing afterwards, you're well prepared for a lot of different industries, which is quite an incredible kind of benefit of doing the further study. Hey, we have time for one very last quick question. One of our attendees has always been curious about this. Are the policy analysts to advisors or ministers in government, would you say that they have a social policy background? Would you say that this degree could provide a path to those roles?
Absolutely. I mean, so policy advisors are often people who are policy trained, and many of them, and we have many graduates from this particular degree who are in policy advisory roles. And that's not only, and some at a very high level, at a ministerial level, but we also have people who are doing, kind of policy work on the ground or policy work within departments at a kind of a mid-tier level as well, developing their careers. I mean, in fact, actually, I think this goes back to that first question about doing policy work in the real world, is that because our graduates know the realities of doing policy work, they are really good advisors as well. Okay, so I think hopefully I've kept the time on that one.
100% with that last question, that does bring us to the end of our Master of Public and Social Policy session. Thank you so much, Toby, for your insights into the course at Macquarie, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sienna.
Thank you. And for our audience, if we didn't quite get to your questions, I saw one that just came through right there as well. If we didn't quite get to it, you can contact our postgraduate team on 02 9850 6791 or email postgraduate@mq.edu.au. We very much look forward to supporting your learning at Macquarie University. Welcome to our postgraduate law session. If you're wanting to shift focus from a different discipline to a legal career, or you already have a law degree and want to specialise, we have different study options for you. For expert advice into all the postgraduate offerings available with Macquarie Law School, I'd like to introduce Dr. Andrew Burke, who is the Interim Director of Education for the Law School and Postgraduate Director of our Juris Doctor program. Joining Andrew is Dr. Christoph Speerfeld, who is the Course Director of our Master of Laws and Master of International Trade and Commerce Law. Andrew and Christoph, welcome.
Hi, Sienna. Nice to see you again.
You too.
Hi.
I'll hand over to both of you if you'd like to share your screen. Enjoy the session, everyone.
Sure. I'll just share my screen. So I thought I'd start by providing a little bit more introduction to myself. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for being here tonight. I am an academic in the law school, but as Sienna said, currently what's called the Director of Education for the law school, so responsible for our teaching, right, our education. I'm a criminal lawyer, so my professional experience, I've practiced in the area of criminal defence, right, representing people charged with crimes. I'm a Macquarie graduate originally. I did my first law degree out of school here in the 1990s. I've practiced, I've done a master's and a PhD as well in criminal law back here at Macquarie. I've been a member of staff now in the teaching staff for 6 or 7 years and Director of Education for about 1.5 years. So I've got a really good understanding of all our courses and how it all works. But also I've got my particular expertise in criminal law in the Juris Doctor postgraduate law course. I teach 2 subjects, criminal justice and then criminal procedure. So if you study here, you'll have me twice. I love criminal law. I really enjoy teaching it. I really like teaching postgraduate students, always really kind of motivated and switched on, easy and rewarding to teach. So I'm going to step you through some information about Macquarie Law School, about our courses, about how we teach and the way that we approach things and what we emphasise. And then, of course, there'll be some opportunities for asking questions towards the end. Just going to start here with our wonderful new building that's currently under construction. I walk past it every day just to cheer myself up, looking at our lovely new building that's on the way. We'll be finished by the end of this year and we'll be in there for early next year. It's a huge boost for law at Macquarie to, for the first time, have a building that will be our law school, a sense of place where not only the academic staff will work, but there's teaching spaces where we'll teach, lecture theatres and tutorial spaces where we'll teach. There's great facilities like special studios where we can record online content to a professional standard with soundproofing and things like that. So there'll be students and staff in one place, really boosting our high-level teaching and the way that we work. Very exciting for us and will make a big difference, I think, to Macquarie Law School and to our teaching into the future. Now, a common question that's commonly asked is, look, what's maybe particularly different about Macquarie Law School and its philosophy? And it's something that's very important to us, is that we teach law in context, as we call it. So I'll explain that a little bit. It's been very important to Macquarie Law School the whole way. In 2 years' time, in 2025, will be 50 years since our first class at Macquarie Law School, 50 years since our first class in 2025. And we have had the same approach the whole way through for nearly 50 years now. When I was educated at Macquarie in the first half of the 1990s, I was educated in this tradition and it shaped me. It shaped my understanding of the law. It shaped the kind of lawyer that I became. What law in context means is that we obviously teach you the law. Of course we teach you the law, but we teach you more than that. So other law schools are what's called black letter law schools, right? And black letter law schools focus on teaching the law, right? So they'll say this act is about this, and it's got these sections in it, and this section 1 says something, and section 2 says something, and section 3 says something. And then there's some case law where courts have considered the act, and let's have a look at these cases. We do that. But then we also, in all the different subjects, take it a step further to understand the law in its context, social, political, economic, environmental context, and as well try to equip students to be able to critique the law, to criticize the law, to pull it apart, to see if it could be better. So in my own area of criminal law, I obviously teach the law, but then I ask students to consider, is the law fair? Is it just? Could it be better? Right? Now, we believe that not only is this a more fun and interesting way to learn the law, because you're thinking about social issues as well as the law, it also makes you a better lawyer. It equips you to go into your profession, understanding not only what the law is, but being able to really think about it and take it apart and be able to propose changes, right, to make the law better and fairer. And we see a lot of debate about that, again, in my area, all the time in criminal law. You know, is sentencing right? Are we getting the sentences about right, or is it too lenient, or is the system out of touch? Or new crimes are created from time to time, or there's a lot of reform in existing areas of crime like sexual assault. In the last couple of years, we've seen a huge amount of reform, and that's being debated in the news all the time. So we want to really equip our students and our graduates to be able to participate in those public debates and to make a really useful contribution as lawyers to making the world better, fairer, more just, more sensible laws that can keep us safe from crime, whilst helping to rehabilitate offenders and punish those who've really done the wrong thing. So it's a more sophisticated, nuanced approach to studying law that teaches both the law and also how it fits into society and the role that it plays, and give you the skills to be able to understand that and unpack it. We're also very important to understand that this is not a 50-year tradition. This is much more maybe a 5-year tradition, but a very modern emphasis upon professional skills, employability, and training for things that you will need to know as a lawyer. So we call it authentic assessment, and we're moving our assessment tasks increasingly to reflect the things that lawyers actually do. So obviously the critical thinking skills, the writing skills, the intellectualism that is an important part of university, that will always be there, and that's not going away. What we're doing is expressing those critical thinking in the context of things that lawyers actually do. For example, because I know it just sounds like words, so you need an example. For example, in my criminal procedure unit, one of the assessment tasks is for students to do a mock interview of a client. So the students pretend to be solicitors interviewing often me, the tutor, as the client. They get very short facts, they have to know the law, they have a short period of time, they have to ask the right questions to get the information that they'll know, and they have to respond to the answers that I give that are very often not what they expect. So it requires students to firstly know the law, because you only have 10 minutes and you have to ask the right questions, you can't waste time. It requires students to have a bit of an understanding of the context, because I will play clients in all different situations that arise in criminal law, right? People who have done the wrong thing, people who haven't done the wrong thing but have been accused of it, people may be suffering from something like a drug addiction, people may be dealing with a mental illness, things of that nature that are very prevalent in criminal law. So to understand the context of the law and how it works, and then to establish some kind of rapport with their client, some kind of understanding, professional communication skills. So it's really testing students' knowledge of the law, students' understanding of how the law works in context, then the professional skills of being able to speak to a client. And that's one of our assessment tasks. So that's a great example of professional skills, hands-on training. We understand really well that students want those skills in order to maximize their employability. And of course, very many of our students, while still studying, are already working at law firms as paralegals or as clerks. So they want these skills to transfer into the actual job they're doing right now. And on that topic, it's really important to note that, like me, many of our staff, our teaching staff, are academics, obviously with PhDs, but have also at some point in their career practiced in the area that they teach, right? Like me, working in criminal law. So they're really well placed to be able to deliver these professional skills, because they understand what it is that students, what they are in the area of law, what it is that students need to understand. And they're also connected with industry. So I love it. One of my favorite things is when students come to me and say, Andrew, I'm interested in working in criminal law. Can you give me some advice? that's one of my happiest moments, because I've got them interested enough in it that they want to work there. But because I'm connected to the industry, I can really explain to people who the employers are, what they're looking for, what the hiring processes are, what they should be looking to do with students to position themselves well, because I understand it. I've been there. So I can provide that really useful hands-on advice. And that's true for many of our academic staff. So not just black letter, law in context, but also with professional skills and hands-on training. Very important in terms of what people are looking for to prepare them for the future. But I understand too, very often, because when I talk to prospective postgraduate students, they want to know, what will my study look like? How will I fit it in? I'm already working. I've already got family. I've got other commitments. How on earth will I fit this in? I'm very interested. I'm quite passionate about the law. I've always thought about doing this, and I'd love to be a lawyer, but I don't quite understand how it's going to fit in to my life. So I want to explain that a little bit. One of the characteristics of our postgraduate study is how flexible it is. And through the pandemic, as tough as the pandemic was, it forced us to learn new ways of teaching and to become more flexible. And when we've been able to take that new approach into this post-pandemic era. So for starters, in terms of the flexibility, you can do our Juris Doctor or our Masters fully online, right? So you never have to set foot on campus. Subject, I've got a note there, of course, international students might have visa conditions to be on campus, but you can Juris Doctor students fully online, right? Never have to come set foot on campus. So now some of our students don't live in Sydney. They live in other states of Australia or overseas. I'm actually teaching a tutorial tonight online after this is finished from 7 to 9 p.m. There's a student there who lives in London, right? He has to attend the tutorial at quite different hours in London, and sometimes that's a bit tricky for him. But there's a student in London. There's another student, another tutorial is in the United States. There's one who's in New Zealand. There's one who's in remote Northwest, Western Australia. So we have students all over the place who don't need to come to campus anymore, and they have that flexibility. Or if you prefer to come to campus, you can, right? You can do all your classes on campus alternatively. And we've scheduled that in a really friendly way so that the tutorials are always on a certain day of the week. It's going to be Thursdays in the future. You'll know if you're on campus, your tutorials in person will be on a Thursday, and you can plan your life around that, right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, other activities. Thursday, I've got uni, and you can rely on that. And we'll set up the tutorial so that you hopefully will only be here for half. You can do 4 tutorials if you're full-time in about half a day, maximum convenience. Also, having everybody here together on Thursdays is great because all our students, all our Juris Doctor students are here and they run into each other. They can catch up for coffee. They can see the friends they made in another subject last semester. Or we can put on drinks events for postgraduate students, and everybody's here on a Thursday to attend. Now, importantly too, with the online or on campus, you can switch back and forth. There's no limit to the flexibility. In one semester, in the same semester, you can be doing one subject online or another on campus. Or from one semester to another, if your circumstances change, you can say, I would like to be on campus, but next semester I've got a job. I've suddenly got a job offer, so I'd like to go online. No problem at all, right? It's a seamless transition, one to the other. Also, you can study either full-time or part-time, right? Full-time or part-time. Full-time is 4 units or subjects. We call subjects units, right? Full-time is 4 units at once. Part-time is 1, kind of 2 or 3. That's up to you. About 3/4 of our students are part-time because they're working full-time as well, or they have family responsibilities or other commitments. Now you can vary that as you like. So one semester you're full-time, next semester you drop down a bit. Maybe the following semester you've got a bit more spare time, you go full-time again, right? A lot of flexibility to change that however you wish. For those students who are online rather than coming to tutorials on campus, we've designed a tutorial structure that allows people to work full-time during business hours. And we have tutorials in the evenings. Like I said, I'm teaching this evening, right, from 7 to 9 p.m. Most units, most subjects will have 12 hours of tutorials. That's 6 times 2-hour lots, kind of every second week. So every second week on a certain night, not Fridays, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Nobody wants to study on a Friday night or teach for that matter, which is fair enough. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, about a 2-hour tutorial every second week, right, across semester. 6 occasions in total, 12 hours in total, right? And that's how you do your unit online. It's not an online degree that's what's called asynchronous, which means you never have to show up at a certain time. And you just do your own individual study. You read things, you listen to things, you watch things. We do require students to show up at a particular time for an online tutorial. And we think that's very important because it allows group discussion, the sharing of ideas, but also we want students to develop their speaking ability, even online, right? Because some court's done online now. Lawyers do meetings online all the time. You need to develop your verbal skills, your verbal presentation skills online as much as in person. And we do that in the tutorials, right? Get people to speak, to participate, to present. It's very important. There's no job you're going to do with a law degree where you never have to speak. Whether you might be someone like me, used to be in court every day, or you might just have to address a client or address a team meeting or something of that nature. But the verbal presentation skills are actually as important as your written communication skills. So we require students to show up tutorials in person or online at certain times to develop those skills to maximize your employability, right? And your development into being a lawyer. Now, so we have tutorials where you need to show up, and they're small group, right? Small size classes. In the postgraduate, they're usually around 20 students, right? So a good class size enables good interaction. You get to know the tutor fairly well. We also have lectures, which are not so much discussion, more a presentation of information. We do them in live lecture theatres here on campus sometimes for some subjects, but they're recorded. All our lecture theatres are set up with automatic whiz-bang cameras. They get my PowerPoint slides, they capture my face and so on. They're recorded and then made available online. So if you're an on-campus student, yes, you can come sit in the lecture theatre, but if you're online or if you're on campus, you can watch the recording at any time you choose. So lectures, watch at your convenience. Tutorials show up at a certain time, whether in person or online. So flexible, emphasising those skills, evenings to allow people to work full-time during the day. Next question we commonly get is, what will I study? What will I study? So I'm going to cover the Juris Doctor, and then I'm going to pass off to Christoph to deal with the other master's degrees in law. The Juris Doctor is a 3-year full-time course, or obviously longer if you're part-time, right? So depending on how quickly you're studying. And it's a master's level law degree that qualifies you to be admitted as a lawyer and to practice law, right? So it's the same as doing a Bachelor of Laws, and that enables you to be a lawyer. The rules say any course that enables you to be admitted as a lawyer in Australia must be a minimum 3 years full-time, right? It's a 3-year degree. It is 1 year shorter than the undergraduate Bachelor of Laws, right? So if you've got another degree already, there's no reason why you can't do another undergraduate degree, right? You could have a Bachelor of Psychology or a Bachelor of Media or a Bachelor of Arts or a Bachelor of Commerce and then do a Bachelor of Laws, you could. But if you do the Juris Doctor, you save a year, which is quite appealing for people, and also can be done online, whereas the Bachelor of Laws requires students to come to campus. So it's more designed around people who already have full-time jobs, already have families and so on, and you save that year. Those prescribed areas of knowledge there on the screen. So they are set nationally in Australia. Any law school, any law degree you do that qualifies you for practice must teach those prescribed areas of knowledge and cover what's essentially a prescribed curriculum of topics that must be covered within each prescribed area of knowledge. Every law school must also assess all of the prescribed areas of knowledge in some way. Right? So you can go to any law school and you'll have a subject called criminal law or a subject called contracts. That'll be the same. But it won't all be taught the same way. And so that goes back to what I was saying before about how we teach, about law in context, not just black letter. It won't always be taught with the same emphasis, the same approach, the same perspective. And of course, you'll have different styles of teaching at different law schools, but you will have to do all those subjects: ethics, contracts, criminal law, torts, property law, and so on. Everybody has some of those subjects they love and some they don't love so much, right? I didn't find property law hugely interesting, to be honest, but many other people do. That's just how it is. You love some, others you get through, right? That's just how it goes. sometimes you might come into a law degree thinking you're very, very interested in one area of law, and then you'd have to do a unit in something you've never heard of, and you find that you love that even more, right? So it can take you in unexpected directions. So it's prescribed areas of knowledge that everybody must do. Macquarie also has some additional compulsory units that aren't nationally prescribed. We have an introductory, so the first unit everybody does called Foundations of Law, that has basically the key skills and knowledge that you need to study a law degree, right? Key skills and knowledge, how does legislation work? How do cases work? How do you interpret legislation? What's called a statutory interpretation. Those sorts of introductory, very important skills. We also make international law compulsory because we believe that in this globalized world, some minimum level of international law is really essential. Many lawyers now work for law firms that aren't just New South Wales based or Australia based, but actually operate globally, right? They represent multinational companies that work globally as well. Some basic understanding of international law is essential if you're going to work in those areas. Jurisprudence, which is kind of legal theories of justice and so on. And also something called PACE, which I'll explain briefly. Now, the Juris Doctor has PACE, the other master's courses don't. PACE stands for Professional and Community Engagement. Professional and Community Engagement. It's a Macquarie thing that is designed to promote employability and skills. So it's one unit that every student does where you are working in the industry in which you're preparing to work. Okay, so you're working there and you do some assignments about it as well. So it's not purely work-based, it's got an academic component, but basically it's getting you out into the workforce in the chosen area for a semester and you get credit for it. Not full-time, obviously, because that would a few hours a week. Now, as I said before, very many of our students are actually working already at law firms whilst they study. And so they might use that work as their PACE placement, and that's fine, right? You're working under somebody who's already a lawyer, you do your assignments there. If that's not the case, then we have a wide range of partner organisations that we place students with. We have a commercial law firm, for example, for those students keen on going to that commercial law route. We have non-profit organisations like the Refugee Advice and Casework Service, for example, is a PACE partner where we place students who are interested in that sort of work. Okay, so if you don't have your own area where you're already working or that you can organise yourself, we will place you somewhere. But it's a great opportunity to test the waters in the field of law, dip your toe in, see if you really like it as much as you think you will, right? Get some experience, build your CV, and so on, right? Really oriented towards professional skills and employability. And then finally, in the Juris Doctor, you get to choose 6 elective units, just 6, from a wide range of units that we offer. I've just provided some examples there, trying to sort of provide a range. We have a number of environmental law units, intellectual property law, always popular, family law is popular, human rights, and then we have more commercial law oriented units, right? We have actually a unit called international commercial law. We have one simply called commercial law. We've got modern corporate governance. We've got taxation, for example. So that's really where you start to go, okay, I've done a lot of my essential units, my required units. I really think I'm very interested in being a family lawyer, for example. So I'll make sure I do that elective and other related electives. You get to specialize into where you think you're going. So that's, oh, sorry, for thoroughness, before I move on, we have a graduate certificate of laws. Now, this is for students who are thinking about doing a Juris Doctor, but aren't quite certain yet about that full commitment, 3 years full-time or part-time equivalent. Aren't quite certain, but want to just test it, right? Just give it a go. See how I go. See how interesting it is. See how well it fits in with my lifestyle. It's just 4 units, so it can be 1 semester full-time or part-time over a year. And you do the 4 units that are on the screen, which are all early units in the Juris Doctor. So they're all units that students do early in the Juris Doctor. At the end of the 4 units, you can either graduate with your graduate certificate of laws, right? That might be enough for you. That might be all you're looking for. Fantastic. You've got a graduate certificate. Or You can automatic transfer if you wish internally within Macquarie into the Juris Doctor seamlessly, and you get full credit for those units. So in other words, you've already done 4 of the 24 Juris Doctor required units, right? You get full credit for them. So it's kind of a way you can say, look, I'm really interested. I'd like to give it a go. I'm just not confident yet that I can commit to 3 years. Give the graduate certificate a go, see how you go, see if you like it, see if you can fit the study in. And then if you do like it, fantastic. Seamless transition into a Juris Doctor with full credit. If on the other hand, that's enough for you for whatever reason, graduate with a graduate certificate. So it's a pretty good option to know about and to consider. Now, at this point, that being enough from me, but for the time being, I'm going to pass on to Christoph to talk about the Master of Laws and the Master of International Trade and Commercial Law.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So we'll have seen like a real wide range of subjects and expertise we have at the law school. You will have also heard from Andrew's presentation that law is really present in all areas of our society and our lives, from health, business transaction, family affairs, energy, environment, etc. Yeah, and that is obviously also reflected in the diversity of the professionals that work at our law school. Andrew is in criminal law. I personally work more on international and human rights law questions. And again, similar to Andrew, had a professional career before joining academia and doing a PhD. So I worked for roughly a decade in the human rights and international justice space, including at international tribunals in Cambodia and elsewhere, and have basically bring this kind of expertise into the classroom when I work with my students. So this kind of hands-on training that Andrew mentioned is really something that is really important to us. Give us an example, for instance, at the moment, I work in one of my human rights units with some students to draft a report to a UN Human Rights Committee. Yeah, so it's just an example of the kind of stuff we do with our students. So I'm also the, apart from my life as an academic, I'm also the director of our coursework masters, and we have 2 of those here on offer. There's the Master of Laws, which is basically a more kind of generalist overview of the law, but going obviously much deeper than our undergrad studies, and the Master of International Trade and Commerce Law. And I will just go briefly through these kind of degrees. Our Masters of Law is essentially a unit that is aimed at giving you a tool to specialize in certain areas of laws. You have 8 units in a year that you can, again, like all the general things that Andrew mentioned, the flexibility, how you build your studies, whether you do it full-time, part-time, whether you do it face-to-face, whether you do it online, etc. All that applies to our master's programs as well. Yeah. So we have these 8 units, but only 2 of those 8 are essential units, because we do that because we think it's important to have a certain basis when you go into your master's degree, and that is legal research methodologies and dispute resolution in law. And the rest you essentially choose from our very wide range of electives. And Andrew has just given you some examples there. I can give you like a few more. We have anti-discrimination law, insolvency law. I personally teach refugee law as well, so you would have it with me. Like sustainable development law, trade law, law of the seas. So whatever area you want to go into, there will be a wide range of subjects available and related subjects that will enable you to specialize. So this is our Masters of Laws, and then I move on maybe to the Master of International Trade and Commerce Law. Andrew can just move the slides there.
Yep.
So this is a more specialized master's degree. Yeah. So here, as the title already says, here you have again the 8 units. Again, you can choose whether you do it full or part-time, full-time or part-time. But we have 4 essential units here, and that is aimed at giving you a real grounding in this very specific area of international law. It's international commerce law, trade law, international law, obviously, to set the basics to engage in this area of law, as well as legal research methodologies. And then again, we have 4 other subjects you can choose from our wide range of elective units that are on offer. And I'm also perhaps mentioned here for our international students that are online, we also offer, obviously, to package these 2 master's degrees as a 1+1 solution. So for those who want to come for 2 years to Sydney and study for 2 years at our university, there is this possibility that you can just do both degrees together, one after the other. So this is just maybe here our quick overview about the master's degrees. And I'm conscious that we want to leave some time for question and answers with you guys. So feel free to address these to Andrew and me in the Q&A now. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, both of you, for that incredible set of insight. We have a bunch of questions that have come through. I'll start off with one of them from our first attendee. Andrew, is it worth considering a postgraduate degree within the law school if I'm interested in working with refugees within the NGO sector? Big question.
Christoph might be even better able to answer that because that's his area, refugees in the NGO sector. Christoph?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are quite passionate about this area of law here at Macquarie University. So we have both in the undergrad and the postgrads, like our refugees and forced migration unit. So if you want to do that, I would expect you come first into my unit. If you do the JD, you also have the option to do like the PACE unit that we have. And there we have a number of partners in the refugee space that Andrew also mentioned, like RACS, who works with refugees in Sydney and elsewhere across Australia. So there would be a very hands-on kind of involvement as well, where you could gain practical experience if you come and choose one of these postgrad degrees, particularly the JD or others at our university. And it is like in terms of future employment, the kind of law firms that work in this space, they're very often NGO kind of oriented law firms, obviously, that provide, for instance, legal aid services to those who can otherwise not afford assistance.
I think in terms of, like, it was a very specific kind of question in terms of experience, but I think that regardless of your interest and what way you want to go it, most of the time with our internship programs, if you're very keen on something, we can organize a way to get you experience in that area through that course. So great question. Next up, Christoph, I'll ask you this one as well. What would you say that a weekly schedule looks like for a postgraduate law student? We had a question from Harley as well that came in, which was kind of already answered in the sense that Andrew mentioned that we do have flexible study modes for the JD specifically. That one is 3 years full time, but you can study it either on campus, fully online, or a combination of both. So I hope that answers your question there. But more generally, what does a schedule look like for your students, would you say, Christoph?
Maybe we can just start and then Andrew can jump in. Because it is so flexible, it's obviously hard to make a judgment here on how your specific weekly schedule looks like. I think this is the whole idea for a flexibility, that it would give you some freedom to build that weekly schedule. When it comes to like a workload perspective, we have these 4 units that you do in a semester, and that you can arrange. And we have, for instance, on the postgrads, as we said, we do the tutorials just every 2 weeks. So it gives you the opportunity to focus and spread out like the preparation work, your readings, etc., at the time that is convenient to you, while still fulfilling the requirements for these 4 units. So it really depends to you. You can be the marathon runner and say, I do every day like 1 hour, for my studies, or you can say, I work, 4 days a week full time. So I reserve my Friday to really catch up on things and read things. So that really depends on you. But Andrew, jump in here.
No, absolutely. I mean, look, a really high percentage of our postgraduate students are part-time. As I said before, I think 2/3 to 3/4 of JD students are part-time, which makes sense because people have full-time jobs and family and other commitments. And the cohort is quite diverse, right, in the Juris Doctor. Much more so, like our undergraduate Bachelor of Laws is 95% school leavers, right? So the first year is 95% 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and so on. The Juris Doctor is much more diverse. So there are some students who've come straight from an undergraduate degree, might be in the early mid-20s. There are other people who've maybe worked a few years in a job and decide it's not for them, they'd like to retrain into the law. And then there's older people, again, who like their job, but doing a law degree would add something and help them get promoted or whatever. So our ages range from sort of early mid-20s through to people in their 60s. It's kind of very diverse, and full-time or part-time. So if you're on campus, like I said, you'll have tutorials on a Thursday. You'll have 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on how many subjects you're doing. Lectures to watch at your leisure. If you're online, you'll have the evening tutorials. Again, 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on how many units you do, for 2 hours every second week, right? So sometimes they're designed to alternate. So if you're doing 2 subjects, you might have them alternating weeks. So each week you've got one evening with a 2-hour tutorial, for example, if you're doing 2 units at once. Lectures to watch at your leisure, assessments to do obviously in your own time. I certainly would recommend if people are working full-time that you don't also study full-time. I think that's probably asking a bit much of yourself. Start part-time and see how you go.
On that, exactly, Andrew, one of our attendees has asked if, for example, they maybe miss some tutorials or some discussions or things like that because they're working part-time or full-time and kind of struggling to juggle. Does that affect their WAM? What are their kind of flexibility options and support options if that is the case?
Yeah, look, good question. Many, if not most of our units do have a small part of the mark is for class participation, maybe 10%, 20% at most, which is for your, as I said, to develop those verbal presentation skills, right? The ability to speak about the law and to discuss issues and so on. And so that does require you to be there and to participate. But we do understand, of course, that things happen. People get sick. The family members get sick, other dramas, things going on in people's lives. So there'll be a bit of flexibility. For example, in my unit I'm teaching tonight, there are 2 online tutorial groups and they alternate weeks. So for me, it's every Thursday night, but for them, it's every second Thursday. If someone messages me and says, I can't make it tonight because something's come up with work, I'll say, well, do you want to come to the group next week instead? Right? Come with the other group. Like you won't know any of them. There'll be different people, but no worries, right? That's fine. So that flexibility to move around like that. If it really gets to be an issue where people are missing a significant amount of class through being sick or whatever, the university does have provisions. You apply online for what's called special consideration. And if for some reason you're unwell, you can't attend, we make alternative arrangements, right? So maybe in lieu of attending and participating, you write something addressing the tutorial discussion questions that night, and I read that, and that becomes your assessment. So there are flexibilities there if something really goes wrong in your life or whatever. And it obviously does happen. I mean, when you have a lot of students, there's always somebody who's, like, sounds awful, but somebody who's had a bereavement or something of that nature, and they have to miss a week or 2 here or there. So we're very used to that, and we understand the reality of a lot of people's lives, and we're accommodating as much as we can be.
No, for sure. I think, and any degree that you're doing at Macquarie as well, we always have a massive emphasis on flexibility and support services and making sure that there is a way for you to get through with the support that you need, depending on whatever your situation is. Thank you so much for everyone who are sending through their questions. We still have lots coming through. Whoever would like to tackle this one, we have a student who is currently doing a Bachelor of Laws double and is interested in postgraduate law. However, they just want some more clarification on the process. So must they do the JD before moving to masters, or once they finish their bachelor's, do they move straight to the masters? What's the kind of process on that?
Okay, so I'll do this. If you're doing a Bachelor of Laws, you don't need to do a JD, right? They achieve the same outcome. They're both degrees that will qualify you for practice, meeting the national requirement, curriculum rules. JD's a year shorter. So you wouldn't, if you've got a Bachelor of Laws, you wouldn't also do a JD. If you wanted further legal education specialisation, then you would do a 1-year Master of Laws, a coursework masters, as Christoph was speaking about. Some people do that straight out of their undergraduate. It's more common to do it after a period in the workforce, which is actually what I did. So I originally practiced in environmental and planning law, which was good, but maybe not quite right for me. I then wanted to move into criminal law and had an opportunity to do so, but it had been a few years since I studied criminal law and evidence and related things I really needed to know about. So I did a coursework masters where I just did 8 courses, 8 subjects, and I picked advanced criminal law. I picked advanced evidence law, and I got my skills back up, right, so that I could make that career transition. So people very often use it like that, sort of mid-career to bolster their skills or to assist them for a promotion or to move, or sometimes again straight out of undergrad. But yeah, that you would do. So the short version is, if you've already got a Bachelor of Laws, you would do a 1-year master's and really specialise deeply in something you want to know about that's relevant to your work.
And I think we've got another question there from Harley that came through while you were answering that one, who I think is just trying to seek some more clarification. So if someone's already done a previous master's study so I think they're asking if they could get recognition of prior learning if they've already done a previous master's for the JD, or is it more that it's all core units and they'd have to do it in the same advertised time?
Yeah, no, fair question. Yes, RPL, recognition of prior learning, it's called, so credit, is possible. If I remember the slides with the prescribed areas of knowledge, and there's the units that cover those prescribed areas. Now, we cannot give you credit for a prescribed area unless you've studied an equivalent unit at another law school, because when you come to ask to be admitted as a solicitor onto the roll of solicitors, the Legal Profession Admission Board will check that you've done a unit for every prescribed area of knowledge, and they'll knock you back if you haven't done it. So you might have done a unit in, say, a Master's of Criminology that looks a bit like criminal law, but if it doesn't cover entirely and 100% of the required curriculum, you still have to do a criminal law unit at any law school, right? That's how it works. With the electives, there's a bit more flexibility. So, for instance, recently, because in my role, I deal with all the credit applications. Actually, somebody had been working in international law, in sort of refugee and development stuff, so on, had done some quite academic work with it, so written submissions and documents sort of for UN committees and so on. And they set out their professional work, and I said, yep, fair enough, you can get credit for our refugee and migration law unit because you're already quite expert in it, right? So that saves them an elective. So yes, you can get some credit both for professional work and for a master's you might have done, but it's much easier with the electives because the prescribed areas of knowledge are really very tight in terms of what you have to learn and what you have to be assessed on.
For sure. So I guess it's a case-by-case basis, depending on what you studied, where and how closely it lines up. So if you are someone who's in that boat, the best kind of situation is to just get academic advice from the uni, and we can provide more insight on a personalised basis, I'd say. Yeah. Christoph, I'll pass over to you for this one. One of our attendees says that they understand Macquarie law degrees don't have specialisations. So how does this work if they're keen to become specialised in a specific area?
Well, this is only partly correct. As I just introduced, we have, for instance, the Master of International Trade and Commerce Law, which is in itself a specialization. So in some areas, we have this kind of specialization, and others, like in the LLM that I'm also the rector of, you basically do this through the electives. That's why we have only 2 core units in the LLM, and the others are basically specializations. So you can really then say, I want to get the whole rich diversity of, let's say, environmental law. Yeah. And we have a range of units there. There's like energy law, there's environmental law, there's climate change law. There's all kinds of different electives in this field. We have a Center for Environmental Law and a Center for Energy and Natural Resource Innovation and Transition at the law school, where a lot of experts in this field work. So this gives you an opportunity to specialize both within your studies, but also like by coming to events at the centers, etc. So there's a range of ways of gaining this kind of specialization throughout your studies. And maybe, Andrew, if you want to add something, how you do that in the JD.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. We don't have majors or specializations within the Juris Doctor. I understand some other universities do, and they say you can do this sort of specialization in commercial law or environmental law or whatever. I have to say, it doesn't actually really make any difference. We still have the same units. What you do at a university, if you're creating a specialization, you say, okay, you've got 6 electives. These are our commercial law units. You do all those 6 and we'll call it a specialization or a major in commercial law, and that will go on your transcript. But we still offer those same units. You just choose them, right? You just do those 6. And when we were putting the course together, we consulted with law firms, right, with the legal profession, and the law firms that employ a lot of graduates and a lot of our graduates, and they said they couldn't care less about majors. or specializations in those law degrees, that just because a graduate says, I did a major in commercial law, they don't assume that that you're any more useful to them than somebody who didn't, right? They know that you've covered the basics, that you have skills, they're looking for a certain personality type and so on. And they back themselves to teach you the key skills that you need. So to be honest, a lot of those majors, specializations that universities offer do have a marketing component to them. On a university website, it kind of looks great. But actually, in reality, it's no different. You can study those same subjects or whatever. And our research shows us that employers are not influenced by it, but it's not an advantage to you in the job market.
For sure. Moving on to a more general question, because I think we spoke a lot about kind of how the course can be quite flexible to your needs if you want to come in on campus or you want to do some online or hybrid stuff like that. In terms of like your learning materials, so textbooks, different kind of materials or resources for classes, are these all digital now, or is it a mix?
Look, it's a mix. Every unit has what's called an iLearn page. So it's just a website which is the basis for all your interaction with the unit, where the readings are there, you access the lectures there, you find out all the essential information, you get your assignments there and so on. That now links, you can click there to link to the university library, where you can get electronic versions of the readings. That said, in lots, particularly in our essential units, our prescribed areas of knowledge, we do set textbooks. I've got an example right here in my unit. It's a big kind of legal looking textbook, big kind of thick thing. We do set textbooks. Because the textbooks are designed for these prescribed areas of knowledge. They're produced for that reason, so they're very useful. There are electronic versions in the library, but licensing means that only a certain number of students can access them at once. So most students still would buy a hard copy, a paper version. Easy to buy online. It's just like you buy anything these days, you just Google it, right, and find the cheapest one, and it gets shipped to your door. It's not too difficult. But so yes, most resources are online, but still with some textbooks, it can be easier and more beneficial to actually have a hard copy.
For sure. And in terms, another question about the JD has come through. What are the career options post studying the JD other than becoming a lawyer?
Yeah, great question. Look, a lot of our students, graduates, go into other areas, less so with the JD, which is interesting. Of our undergraduates, about half go into other areas after graduating, other than strictly being a solicitor or a barrister. It is honestly, in some ways, a bit of a generalist degree that is useful for lots of different areas. Policy roles in the public sector, for example, right, which are kind of highly valued, can be very useful to have a law degree there. Going into the corporate world, lots of areas of sort of corporate risk management, compliance, understanding policies and so on. You don't actually need to be a lawyer, but a law degree is super useful, right, and tends to push you towards the top of the pile. All sorts of areas, diverse areas, journalism, right, media and so on, it's really useful. I've got an analogy, I guess I like to use, or not, it's not an analogy, an example. I actually met my wife at law school at Macquarie back in the 1990s. Now, she graduated the same day as me, same graduation ceremony. She's never practiced as a lawyer, right? She's never had a practicing certificate, unlike me. She has had a career in the public service. That's been a wonderful career that's made her now the point where she's very senior. She got her first job as a graduate hire at the Environment Protection Authority. They hired 5 people from all of New South Wales, right? And it's thousands and thousands of people apply. It's hyper competitive. And it's not a legal role, right? It was a policy role. But of the 5 people they hired, they all had law degrees, including her, right? They all had law degrees. And they're all still in the public service and have moved up to very senior ranks. It puts you to the top of the pile. Would my wife have got that job without a law degree? Probably not, right? And it's built her whole career. So it really is a wonderful generalist qualification for lots of roles. And it's seen that way by employers. It's seen to be prestigious. You're well educated. You understand how things work. You're valued.
For sure. And one more question on the JD that we've just had come through as well is, can you do a placement in corporate and financial law in the JD through the university? So I assume maybe through like one of our PACE units or something like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So look, most work is, in practice, law firm work is commercial work, right? Because there's a lot of businesses and it's well paid. So a lot of students are already working in commercial law as a paralegal whilst they're still studying, and so they do it that way. Or in terms of our placements that we organise, we have a partnership with a commercial law firm, Thompson Greer, who are quite a big firm, and they take every semester a certain number of our students for a PACE placement, go and work there and get experience in commercial law. So we can place you, or you can find that work yourself. But there's a lot of work going. It's amazing to me right now how much demand there is for paralegals, for law students whilst they're still studying. So many are already working at law firms, and the law firms are saying to them, have you got any friends studying? Have you got to find somebody else? We need more people. We need more people. This is amazing demand. So there's actually more demand than there is supply. So there's really no trouble seems to be finding those jobs.
Yeah, fabulous. Like that's what we were saying before as well, in terms of if you do have a really specific interest, we can definitely help you get placed in a placement in that unit that you do in an area that you are passionate about. And that is one of the really nice things about completing a placement that's built into your degree at Macquarie. We had some comments earlier, and I just wanted to shout out the fact that if you have missed one of the previous segments, like if we went over the JD or something earlier in the session, we will be sending out a video later in the week that contains all of these sessions. So you can go back and watch them if you are feeling a bit lost or you missed a certain area that you were interested in before. We have a few more minutes and a few more questions to go through. Christoph, what would your advice be for aspiring lawyers on how to prepare for a legal career?
Oh, again, that depends a lot on which kind of career you want to go. As we just heard, you can work as a lawyer, but you can also do all these law related kind of work in areas that affect regulation. I think what our philosophy is at Macquarie is that it is a combination of knowledge and skills. Yeah, like we want you both to understand what the law is, but we also want you to understand how it operates in real life out there in society. And I think this is really what a lot of our lectures will give you as a message, like in how to prepare. Like if you're interested, in, like as I just said, like in the refugee space or elsewhere, you could come to us, and obviously we would have advice for you how we once try to work in this space. We have networks, we know people in this space, etc. So we can give you very targeted advice how to prepare. But generally, I think what for us is very important is this kind of combination of the knowledge and the skills, and to prepare you really, to give you a real understanding what law does out there when you leave the doors of this university and how it operates in our lives.
Fabulous. Andrew, do you have any tips as well?
Okay, look, it's diverse. Get involved in things as much as you can. So one thing that hasn't been mentioned tonight, but one of the best things about Macquarie Law, to be honest, is our student society, which is called MULS, Macquarie University Law Society. They're the biggest student society on campus. I think they're probably just about the best, or certainly the best organised on a remarkable scale. They're actually immediate class as a medium-sized charity, right? They have a turnover of nearly $500,000 a year from all their various activities. They organise an astonishing range of events, both on campus and online. So, for example, they have careers events, all different kinds of careers events. There's like 20, 30 per year in different careers events for commercial law, big law firms, non-profit law, legal aid, all different areas. They also organise a lot of competitions and mooting competitions, like mock trial type stuff, a lot of which is online, right? And so anyone can participate. Great way to build up your skills. So get involved in that, take advantage of all of that, find the thing that you're passionate about, try and get some experience whilst you're still a law student, whether it's paid or volunteer, and ask, right? Ask people. Like I said before, one of my favorite things is when students come to me and ask, how do I get involved? How do I become a criminal lawyer? Because I feel like I've won, right? I've inspired them to do the thing that I love. Staff are all like that, right? People love helping people into employment. So ask advice, seek people out. Don't be shy.
Great advice from both of you, and thank you so much for your time tonight during this session. That's the last question that we have time for at the moment. So thank you so much to Andrew and Christoph for sharing all of your expertise with us.
Thanks, Sienna.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
For our audience, if we didn't quite get to your question tonight, you can contact our team on 02 9850 6791 or email postgraduate@mq.edu.au. We can't wait to help you reach your career aspirations at Macquarie. Also, we will be sending out a recording of the session as well, so you can go back and watch in case you missed any of those finer details. Our last session for this evening is on the Master of Planning. Joining us tonight is Associate Professor Donna Houston, the course director of this course. Welcome, Donna.
Hi, thank you, Sienna.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to share your slides,
Sure.
get going. Thank you so much for joining.
Oop, there we go. Okay, is that all good? Everyone can see?
All good to go.
Great. So do you ever wonder about how the places where you live, work and play have been created, how they are managed and how they change over time? Have you ever wondered about who helps governments and communities make decisions over land uses, housing, transport, infrastructure, parks and public spaces? What careers are available to people interested in caring for and making places, and in shaping built and natural environments for present and future generations? So my name is Associate Professor Donna Houston. I'm the Chair of the Discipline of Geography and Planning and the Course Director of the Planning Programs at Macquarie University. This evening, I'm going to introduce you to the Master of Planning. A broad definition of planning is the act of deciding to do something. It is a process of thinking that formulates actions to achieve specific goals. We're all planners in this sense. Planning is based on both predetermination and foresight, the setting of objectives and targets of how to accomplish them. There are different types of careers that involve planning: event planner, wedding planner, and project and operations managers. Architects, builders, lawyers, engineers, and designers all utilize planning skills in their everyday work. The Master of Planning is a professionally accredited qualification in urban and regional planning. Unfortunately, no weddings. Urban and regional planning is a specific type of planning that focuses on the development and management of land use and places in urban and rural areas. At its core, it involves analysing current and future needs, identifying issues, and formulating strategies to promote the sustainable and efficient use of resources. The planners are also concerned with planning for the future sustainability and livability of cities and regions. Urban planning is sometimes associated with stories in the media about things that have gone wrong or with things that people don't like, such as controversial developments, or with issues such as traffic or growth in housing that outpaces infrastructure. But consider this. What would the absence of urban and spatial planning look like in your city, town, or suburb? What would it look like if there were no regulations such as land use zoning, or no strategic management of infrastructure and projected growth, no laws or provisions to preserve natural and cultural heritage, no mechanisms for which the public can have a say in decision-making over the built environment? While urban planning doesn't always get things right, society takes for granted the work that planners do every day to maintain and improve the quality of places where we live, work, and thrive. Indeed, one of the things that I love the most about teaching planning to postgraduate students is that it is such a potentially rewarding career. Planners work in the public interest to look after and shape our public domains. And this is a very precious part of life in towns and cities, as public domains such as parks and streets and plazas, roads, open spaces, public transport networks, community and recreational facilities are the lifeblood of towns and cities. They are the things that make them livable and enjoyable. The work that planners do to create and maintain and revitalise public domains is incredibly important to the communities that they serve. The other aspect of planning that is incredibly important and rewarding is that it is a profession that is future focused. Planners address some of the critical challenges facing society, such as climate change, biodiversity loss, demographic change, urban and economic growth, diversity and inclusion, and growing inequality. So what is planning? In a nutshell, urban and regional planning is a diverse and dynamic field that is about improving the quality of places where people live, work, and play. It is also about sustaining the quality of natural environments and creating new opportunities for green and sustainable transport and urban development. Good planning works in the public interest to create more accessible, equitable, efficient, and attractive communities and places. So what is it that planners do? Well, first of all, planning is collaborative. Planners work in teams to conduct research, engage with stakeholders, and make informed decisions to shape the physical, social, and economic aspect of communities. So this wheel is produced by the Planning Institute of Australia, a national professional body that represents planners and which externally accredits planning courses, such as our planning courses at Macquarie University. The wheel shows the diversity of planning careers, and this is divided into 4 broad categories. So in the category of strategy and policy, planners work to manage things like urban sprawl and population growth, to create sustainable and well-designed communities that can accommodate growing populations while minimising the negative impacts of urban sprawl. They formulate land use plans and zoning regulations to determine how land should be utilised for different purposes, such as residential, commercial, industrial, and recreational areas. Planners review and evaluate development proposals, ensuring compliance with zoning regulations, environmental regulations, and community goals. They gather and analyse data related to population, land use, economic trends, transportation, and infrastructure to understand existing conditions and to anticipate future needs. Planners value and protect historic sites, landmarks, and cultural heritage, integrating them into the urban development plans to maintain a sense of identity and community. They contribute to the formulation of policies and regulations related to land use, housing, transportation, and environmental protection, ensuring that they align with community objectives. Planners oversee the implementation of plans, monitor their progress, and make adjustments as needed to achieve desired outcomes. In the community section of the wheel, planners aim to create inclusive and equitable communities by addressing issues of social justice, affordable access to services, and reducing disparities among different socio-economic groups. They engage with stakeholders, including residents, community organisations, and government officials to gather input, address concerns, and promote public participation in the planning process. They collaborate with economic development agencies to attract investment, promote job creation, and foster economic growth within the community. Planners consider economic factors and market conditions when managing land use. They assess the demand for different types of development and identify opportunities for economic growth, job creation, and revitalisation. So in the environmental sector, planners consider environmental factors like green spaces, conservation areas, and sustainability practices to minimise the impact of development and to preserve natural resources. They work to preserve open spaces, parks, and natural areas within urban and regional environments, and they identify areas of ecological significance or recreational value to develop plans to protect and enhance these spaces. Planners also work in the area of disaster resilience and emergency preparedness. They plan and develop strategies to mitigate the impacts of natural disasters such as floods and fires, and ensure that cities are prepared for emergencies. And in the final sector of design, planners work to ensure that cities have adequate and affordable housing options for residents. And you may have been following this in the media recently, that this is a very big issue for Sydney right now. Balancing the demand and supply of housing in various income brackets. They assess transportation systems, including roads, public transit, and pedestrian infrastructure, and develop plans to improve mobility, reduce congestion, and enhance accessibility. Planners also encourage the adaptive reuse and redevelopment of underutilised or vacant properties to revitalise communities and promote sustainable land use practices. This approach involves repurposing existing buildings or areas for new uses instead of expanding into undeveloped land. So I've chosen three quick career snapshots to give you today, given that planning is such a diverse area. But you should note that planners actually do have pretty diverse careers. So all those different areas of planning, often planners throughout their career will work in one or more areas of planning. They'll work across the public and private sector. So they may spend some time working in local or state government and then with private development firms or in private consultancy. So the three main jobs that planners do, particularly entry-level jobs, once you've finished a degree in planning, creating sustainable communities and places by preparing development control plans. So a development control plan is a planning instrument used by local government authorities to provide detailed guidelines and controls for development within particular areas. It is a statutory document that supplements the provisions of the local planning scheme or local zoning regulations. They also work to manage land use by preparing and assessing development applications. Development assessment refers to the process of evaluating proposed development projects to ensure that they comply with planning regulations and to meet community objectives. It involves reviewing the development applications, conducting assessments, and making decisions about whether to approve or refuse the proposed development. Development assessment considers factors such as environmental impacts, land use compatibility, design quality, heritage preservation, and community consultation. And finally, planners work to manage growth and change by contributing to the strategic plans and visions of localities, cities, and metropolitan regions. Strategic urban planning refers to the process of developing and implementing long-term strategies and policies to guide the growth, development, and transformation of urban and regional areas. It involves analysing existing conditions, identifying goals and objectives, and formulating plans and initiatives to address various aspects of urban life, such as land use, transportation, infrastructure, housing, environment, and social equity. So the really important thing about planning is that it is a profession that seeks to integrate all these complex areas of urban life. So if we have a look at this picture, we can see how planners may have shaped the urban environment. So one of the other exciting things about planning as a profession is that you get to see your work in the landscape. So planners have helped to shape or influence this environment by making zoning regulations. So you might see here that there are different types of housing and different types of density. You can see the provision of open space in and around the housing developments, and particularly in around the more dense housing developments. You can see networks of roads and infrastructure. You can see the preservation of the foreshore area and some of the natural environment. So planning has a role in all of these different things. And it's also very integrative in that the whole point of planning is to make sure that the different land uses are compatible. So studying planning at Macquarie. So no planning course can deliver on all the complexity of planning that was represented in the wheel by Pierre, but it also explains why planning programs have such a diversity of coursework within them. So within our degree at Macquarie University, we teach a range of planning skills and knowledge areas related to integrating the social and environmental dimensions of planning. And I'm very proud of the course that we've designed here and the outcomes that this has achieved for students. We have a particular strength in planning strategy and policy, and in connecting the social, community, and environmental aspects of planning. This strength is grounded in leading research expertise of the academics involved in the program, our professional and industry connections, and in the professional experience of the 3 practicing planners who teach into the postgraduate program. And this is just a snapshot of some of the things that you'll learn about in the degree. So you'll do some environmental and planning law, strategic and statutory planning. We have a focus on smart and healthy cities, placemaking and urban governance, social impact and climate vulnerability assessment, First Nations planning, social and environment and urban policy, and planning for diverse cities and places. The course also offers a flexible zone where that can be used to develop more specific expertise in a particular area of planning, and particularly in the areas of law, policy, environmental and social planning. And we recognise that for postgraduate students, life is busy and people are coming from diverse backgrounds. But if you do have some relevant work experience or a degree in a related field, you can also talk to us about recognition of prior learning, which can reduce the length of your degree. And other benefits of the Master of Planning are professional accreditation with the Planning Institute of Australia. And it is for domestic students supported by Commonwealth supported places. So I'll hand it back now to Sienna for questions and answers.
Thank you so much for your session. If anyone does have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. But we do have some questions to get into. So could you give us a bit more detail on how the course is structured and what students will learn specifically day to day?
Okay, so look, the course is quite flexible. So we have structured it so students can come and study in person on campus, which is really important to some people. But we also recognise that people work, and so all of our units are also available in flexible mode and fully external as well. We do try and offer a lot of work integrated opportunities for our students. So everything that I've been talking about is an expression of influencing the real world. And so our courses really try to mirror that. So we try, we've got professional planners who teach into the program, but we also have lots of guest speakers and opportunities for going on field trips and really being able to investigate the urban environment.
So exciting. So I guess the idea is not only can you study such a diverse kind of range of things, but you can also learn that in the form that best suits you, whether it's on campus, online, or maybe even a mixture of both, depending on what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Fabulous. Obviously, it is a very diverse area, and you're talking about how it could be kind of, you can go into so many different things depending on what area you're interested in. What would you say the roles that your graduates tend to go into? Can you give us some examples of what they can expect after graduation?
Yeah, so look, typically, historically, most planning graduates will begin a job with local government, often in the development assessment area. It's a great way to learn about the planning system in a very dynamic environment. However, there's a shortage of planners at the moment. So it's actually a lot of people are really looking for planners across all those different areas of planning. And so because there's such a demand, our graduates are, well, a lot of them are already in jobs before they finish their degrees, and they are working in all areas. Private consultancies are almost overtaking local governments in the employment of planners at the moment. But a lot of planners do start out sort of preparing the development control plans and doing the assessment planning, and then move into strategic planning as they become more knowledgeable and advanced. But there is a lot of very fast upward mobility in the profession at the moment.
Because of the high demand, which we can start to enroll.
Yes, indeed.
We had another question come through specifically about the daytime in-person classes. Obviously, because it is a postgraduate course, lots of people are working. Are there specific days that the in-person classes are scheduled on?
That's a really good question. Not specifically particular days. We do try and schedule our postgrad a little bit more in the afternoon and evening where possible, just to allow for people who work. But yeah, we don't have specific days, but yeah, we're definitely very open to sort of understanding a little bit more what the needs of students are, particularly in this post-COVID world that we're living in as well. Yeah.
For sure. So when we obviously do have a lot of students who are working part-time or full-time alongside the courses, what would you say that they could expect an average week would look like in terms of their commitment to study?
Okay. Look, a lot of our students do work full time, and some of them a range of careers. Some people are moving into planning for an entirely new profession. Some actually work already as planners and are looking to upskill with a master's degree. So a lot of our students do work, study part-time, because the full-time postgraduate load, 10 credit points, supposed to be 10 hours a week for each unit. It's a full-time job. So we usually for most of our students, they probably take 1 or 2 units a semester, and do it over a slightly longer period of time while working. As I said, we have a variety of different modes that we offer our units in. So all the fully external units have online activities, recorded lectures and material that is designed for people to study at their own space, in their own pace. Which obviously is makes it a bit easier for some people who have got unpredictable work schedules. Other people are able to get some time off work to come onto campus one afternoon a week and maybe take a face-to-face unit and then take a combination. We do have some scheduled online units, which are classes, but they're scheduled in the evening and people can jump on the evening and take classes. So there's a variety of ways in which we try and accommodate students.
For sure. So that week could look like anything. It kind of needs to be accommodated into that schedule and the rest of their life. Yeah.
And most of our students, unless they're not living in Sydney, do a combo. I think some units online, some face-to-face. Yeah.
We had a student who's just written in, they have a degree in civil engineering. Is it common for engineers to then pursue postgraduate degrees in planning, would you say?
It's not uncommon. There are a lot of overlaps, particularly in the area of transport infrastructure planning between engineering and planning. So often planning is a good complement for someone who does have a background in civil engineering. Planning, though, does have a much stronger grounding in social and environmental science. So there are some things that, are new to someone coming from an engineering background as well.
And would you say that you have any advice to give to a student who's interested in going into planning, what you could say to an undergraduate?
Look, my advice is that, look, if you love, a lot of our undergraduate students come into planning from geography. So they've got this sort of real interest in, or they have had an interest in places and built environments and cities and, sort of how they're structured and how they function. And so if you've got that passion for places and built environment, you're really interested in how we get around our cities and, sustainability issues, and you want a career where you're actually shaping something that's happening in the real world, then planning is definitely a career for you. And it's, we do have like a great foundation zone in the master's program for people who are coming in from areas that are a little bit different. And that's a really great foundation for students to sort of build up their knowledge and then sort of move into the more substantive parts of planning.
Thank you so much for your time, Donna. That's an excellent advice. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
No worries. Thank you very much, Sienna, and goodbye to everyone. See you later.
And with that last question, that does bring us to the end of our postgraduate showcase for law and social sciences. Thank you so much to all our course directors tonight for your insights and expertise, and for everyone at home who tuned in. For all our attendees, coming up soon are our postgraduate consultations between the 5th to the 16th of June. If we didn't quite get to your question tonight, or if the session has left you wanting to find out more about our postgraduate courses, you can book a one-on-one consultation with our team through the link in your email or scan the QR code on the screen to book your preferred time slot. The postgraduate team are available for all your coursework inquiries. You can contact us on 0298506791 or email postgraduate@mq.edu.au. We very much look forward to supporting your career aspirations at Macquarie University. Take care and good night.